America does not stand still, and neither will I. So wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation to expand opportunity for more American families, that's what I'm going to do.
Pretty unbelievable. And kicking things off tonight are two of the most conservative senators in Washington who say what they mean what they say. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Gentlemen, how are you?
Sean, great to be with you.
Good to see you, Senator. We've talked a lot about the president, the use of executive orders. I guess what he can't get done legislatively, he's going to use executive fiat. Legal, not legal?
Absolutely not legal and really dangerous. I mean, it's been the pattern of the Obama presidency over and over again to just disregard the Congress, disregard the law. You know, Sean, we've never had a president like this. You take something like Obamacare. He unilaterally granted an exemption for big business. The law doesn't allow that. He said big business gets an exemption. He unilaterally granted an exemption for Congress. The law doesn't allow that. And most strikingly, when over 5 million people had their health insurance canceled because of Obamacare, usually the way our constitutional system works, if a federal law isn't working, the president would go to Congress and say, we need to change this, we need to fix it. Instead, the president just held a press conference in which he told insurers, I'm instructing you, private companies, issue insurance policies, rather, that are illegal, that Obamacare bans. In over 200 years of our nation's history, Sean, we have never had a president just tell private citizens, violate the law, I'm the president, and I'll give you a get-out-of-jail-free card.
All right, so we have co-equal branches of government, Senator Paul. Right?
At least once upon a time we apparently did. But,
separation of powers, right?
No, I think the president's changed the Constitution. He's decided that it's optional and he's going to obey it when he feels like it. But really, this is a problem. This isn't a Republican-Democrat problem. This is a separation of powers. This is the checks and balances of government. And basically, democracy is messy. You have to work and you have to try to convince people. But it's not very conciliatory to say, yeah, I'm going to work with Congress, except for if they disagree with me, then I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. And so that's a real problem. And no, I foresee that he isn't going to try to work with Congress. It's either his way or the highway.
So it's confrontational. I took that to be confrontational.
I think it's an arrogance. It's an arrogance, and it's confrontational. And really, do you think that brings people more likely to talk with him when he says, I'm going to do it whether you like it or not?
All right, let's take a trip down memory lane. We have a montage of then candidate Obama railing against then President George W. Bush over the use of executive orders. And will these words come back to haunt him?
There's been a tendency on the part of this administration to try to hide behind executive privilege every time there's something a little shaky that's taking place. And I think, the administration would be best served by coming clean on this. It's not actually true that the Patriot Act was the worst. Most of the problems that we have had in civil liberties were not done through the Patriot Act. They were done through executive order by George W. Bush. And I think one of the biggest problems of the last 8 years has been the degree to which President Bush has taken almost the opposite tack, that secrecy and concentrations of power in the Oval Office. I taught the Constitution for 10 years. I believe in the Constitution, and I will obey the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress. All right?
We're not going to use signing statements as a way to do an end run around Congress. Let's go through the list. Obamacare. Did he do an end run around Congress?
He's right. He doesn't use signing statements. You know how he granted a waiver to big business? Through a blog post by an assistant Treasury Secretary. It's just openly defying the law. The Constitution puts on the president a responsibility to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And Sean, it is striking. Two people that are absent from this, two players. Number one, Congress. Congress should be defending its constitutional prerogatives. When the president said he will act if Congress doesn't act, just about every Democrat in the chamber jumped to their feet applauding. It is extraordinary to see Democrats abdicating their role under the Constitution to protect our liberties. But number two is the media. Where is the media? If we had anything like an impartial media, they should be calling the administration to account. If this were a Republican, they'd be lighting their hair on fire.
Let me give you two more examples. Senator Paul, not enforcing immigration law. Dictated a second one, recess appointments. I thought they were supposed to be made when the Senate was in recess.
You know, he's going to be rebuked on that. The appellate court has already rebuked him. It's going to go, the arguments have been heard at the Supreme Court, but it's one thing after another, and Ted's exactly right. It's initiation of war on its own, it's amending legislation on its own, it's writing legislation on its own. You know, Montesquieu talked about the separation of powers, and that's where we got some of the ideas for our founding documents, and he said when the executive assumes or usurps the legislative authority, when the executive, when the president attempts to write laws, that's a form of tyranny that we need to fear. But I think there's also the hypocrisy. American public doesn't like hypocrisy. Here he was ranting and raving, it's all Bush's fault and Bush was so terrible, and then he's taking all of those things and gone one extra step and created himself his own little kingdom here. And but it's also right what Ted says, where are the Democrats? I would be standing up today were this a Republican president, and I think Ted would do the same thing. We would stand because we have beliefs in the separation of powers and in the Constitution. I would stand up and challenge a Republican president. Where are the Democrats that will challenge him on this usurpation?
I agree with you about the Democrats, but then we've got to go to the Republicans. Both of you have had an intramural struggle with prominent Republicans. You invited Governor Chris Christie to a beer summit.
Oh, no. We're all one big happy family now.
Is that right? It's all over?
It's all under the bridge. I mean,
it's all under the bridge?
We have all got, we're all getting together now.
No pun intended?
We are all getting together now. We're going to be a big happy party, I think.
Senator McCain, because I agree with both of you on this issue. I think he's usurping power from the Congress, separation of powers, co-equal branches of government, and Senator John McCain has been a vocal critic of you, as have others. Why isn't the Republican Party united on this is a constitutional principle?
Well, look, I think the way we unite Republicans is we stand for principle. And if we're standing to defend free market principles, if we're standing to defend the Constitution, that brings together Republicans across every stripe, whether they are conservatives or libertarians or whether they're right in the middle. That brings together independents and moderates. Sure. Get back to the principles this country was founded on. That's how we unite the Republican Party. Yeah. And you know, the more brazen the president is, I mean, what he started saying now is, I have a pen and I have a phone. You know what? If you want to bring back jobs, he doesn't need a pen. He needs an eraser. He needs to get in and start erasing these job-killing regulations. He needs to start erasing the incredible damage Obamacare is causing, and yet instead he just wants to rule by decree. That threatens everyone's liberty.
All right, we'll get to that. We'll come back and we'll continue with Senator Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. They're going to stay with us. Also, we're going to get their reaction to Hillary Clinton saying Benghazi is her biggest regret.
My biggest, regret is what happened in Benghazi. It was a terrible tragedy, losing 4 Americans, 2 diplomats, and now it's public, so I can say 2 CIA operatives.
Now that, of course, was former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton finally admitting her biggest regret, and that being the deadly terror attack in Benghazi. So why the shift from her infamous line, what difference does it make? As we continue, conservative senators Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, she did say, what difference does it make? And there was a request for security beforehand that was denied. We were told that during the attack nobody helped, and then after we got a big lie.
Right. I think the one thing is that the American people want a commander-in-chief who will send reinforcements. We don't want a commander-in-chief who's not going to protect our ambassador, not to provide security, and when asked imminently for help, not to send reinforcements. So I think it really precludes her even from being considered in 2016, and she really should apologize, frankly, and accept responsibility for the debacle. She says, oh, I didn't read the cables. Why didn't she read the cables? That's absolutely her responsibility. When an ambassador's pleading for help, why didn't she send help?
Why didn't they send the security ahead of time?
Yeah, that's exactly the question.
It's a very good question. And, she says that's her biggest regret. All right, we can believe that. We can take that at face value. But talk's cheap. If it's really her biggest regret, then she should join in calling for a joint select committee in Congress to investigate what happened in Benghazi. We don't know why nothing was done in response to the multiple reports of terrorist activities. We don't know why the State Department repeatedly turned down requests for additional security. We don't know why there were not military assets in place to save those 4 brave Americans. And we don't know why nobody has been held accountable. Nobody at the State Department, and none of the terrorists who carried out this terrorist attack have been brought to justice. And so I'm sorry, Sean, you've got 2 kids. If your kids are fighting and one says they're sorry, sorry is not just saying it, it's making it right. It's fixing what it is you're doing. If she wants to say she's sorry, it's just like President Obama when he said to the 5 million people who've lost their health insurance because of Obamacare, I'm sorry. If you're really sorry, that was the most stunning thing last night, that he speaks for over an hour and says not a word to over 5 million people.
Like your plan, you can keep your plan, Senator. If you like it, doctor, you can keep it, and you're going to save $2,500 a year. I remember those promises.
Yep.
But back to Hillary. Did she say this because she wants to run for president? And do you think there's a political calculation?
You know, it seems with the Clintons almost everything they do is political. But you know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. She can demonstrate that regret is sincere by standing up and saying, we need to get to the truth. We owe it to the American people. Let's have a joint select committee. Let's find out the answers. You know, I'll tell you, it was striking that Gregory Hicks, the Deputy Chief of Mission, career Foreign Service officer, testified before Congress that he got a call from Cheryl Mills, Hillary Clinton's top political aide, telling him, don't speak to Congress, don't speak to the press, don't tell anyone what happened. You know what? You're not sorry if you're engaged in a cover-up. And she needs to come clean. She needs to support getting to the bottom of what happened.
Let me go through one last concept with both of you. You are a conservative. You're a conservative. Is there a problem between the establishment in Washington, where you're working every day, and those that want a more active, pro-conservative agenda? Because I think obviously there is. And is it time for the conservatives to unite and put forward a plan that they can articulate, run on, and be united on? Is that possible?
I would say yes, but I would say it's not new. The struggle in the Republican Party for what the Republican Party represents is healthy, and it's always been there. I went to the 1976 convention when I was 13. Reagan and Ford. Reagan was the upstart, Ford was the establishment. But now everybody's a Reagan Republican, you know? So there are always these battles, and we have to decide how we're going to present our message and how we're going to have a bigger audience, because the bottom line is we're not winning.
What should the message be? Top 5 items? Because I believe it should be the penny plan. I believe it should be energy, 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 because we have more oil resources, shale oil, gas, than all the Middle East combined. I think you got to control the borders, fix education, and offer an alternative to health care. That's my top 5. What are yours?
I would say we have to boldly and passionately defend the Bill of Rights, and we have to defend individual liberty. Those are grand terms, and we need to defend them for everyone.
And they're
black,
under
white,
assault
brown,
right now. You believe
it.
this president is putting the Bill of Rights under assault?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't.
Look, I think Rand's exactly right. You know, if you look at, he mentioned 1976, Reagan took on Gerald Ford, a sitting Republican president, and it's interestingly enough, all of the voices of Washington said he's this crazy cowboy, he's destroying the party, it's terrible. And yet what Reagan did that unified Republicans in 1980 is he brought us back to core principles. And I think there are really 2 sets of principles we need to get back. Number 1, free market principles. And number 2, the Constitution. Those have been the foundations that have led to opportunity and prosperity.
What are the items that you say to the American people, if elected, will accomplish this, this, and this? Debt, deficits. What are your top few items?
We've got to rein in spending, deficits, and debt. It's gone from $10 trillion to over $17 trillion under Barack Obama. We've got to bring back economic growth and jobs. You mentioned energy. We should be having and can have an American energy renaissance by, number 1, preventing all of these job-killing regulations, getting out of the way and letting us develop our natural resources, but even more so, opening up federal lands. Can you imagine if the federal government wasn't just stopping what was going on, but was actively setting an environment?
The president bragged about it last night, right?
Yeah, think about the one thing in our economy is thriving, oil and gas. But what was his proposal for it? To raise taxes on oil and gas. That's the absolute opposite of what we need to be doing. Oil and gas is creating most of the momentum in job creation. It's great. We are becoming more energy independent because of that. So what does he want to do? He wants to punish them and tax them and somehow take away their business expenses.
Isn't it all on private land? Isn't it North Dakota a private land expansion? Midland, Texas, a private land?
He's responsible for 0. He's done nothing to help it.
Leases have gone down 50%.
In fact, he wants to punish oil and gas by raising the taxes.
Well, you and I were talking last night about how in North Dakota, A kid flipping burgers at McDonald's is making 17, 18 bucks an hour. Unemployment in North Dakota is less than 3%.
2.6%.
Booming. It is booming. And the great thing also about energy, if we keep developing our natural resources, we have the capacity to be energy independent. It makes the world a safer place because we're not dependent on countries in the Middle East whose values are very different from our own. But it also has the potential to bring back manufacturing jobs, bring back steel, bring back the sort of jobs where people could go and work an honest day's work and compete with China, not based on low-cost energy. Lord knows we don't want to do that.
Here's what Obama doesn't understand.
Last word. Go ahead.
You know, here's what Obama doesn't understand. Money goes where it's welcome. Why is money going overseas? Why are jobs going overseas? Our taxes are too high. Our corporate rate is twice what Canada's is. We have to lower our taxes. But where is he leading on this? He wants revenue-neutral tax reform or whatever at the best. That's not going to help anybody. We've got to lower taxes and bring money back home from overseas.
Last question. Will both of you campaign for even against sitting senators if you think a better candidate is running? Real quick.
I'm going to stay out of races with incumbents.
And I likely am going to do the same.
Okay. Guys, good to see you both. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator.